Hey everyone, Shane here with etrailer.com. Today I have a 2024 Toyota RAV4. I'm going to walk through how to install the ETBC7 wiring kit for brake controllers. The ETBC7 is going to be designed for vehicles that do not have factory wiring for a brake controller. It's going to give you your 7-pole, it's going to give you your 4-pole, it's going to give you all the fittings and wires to run up to the front to connect to a brake controller so that you have brake functions for a trailer. It's also going to give you all of your proper connections for your turn signals, brake lights, and running lights. Something to keep in mind is if you are going to install a brake controller with the ETBC7, it is going to require a 4-pole wiring kit connected to the taillights of the vehicle. The 4-pole will come down and connect into the back of the wiring harness on your 7-pole, and then of course you have your wiring that you're going to run up to the front into the vehicle and connect it to the brake controller. The ETBC7 is designed, it's a universal kit that is designed to be used with pretty much any brake controller that has universal wiring on it. We chose to use the Red Arc Tow Pro Elite. With a lot of the newer vehicles, your standard or your typical brake controller, the box style that has to be mounted somewhere here on the dash, there's not a whole lot of room anymore, so it makes it a little bit difficult in these newer vehicles. So these Red Arc Tow Pro brake controllers make it a lot easier. It's a lot cleaner. You can find a lot of them with knockout panels to go in place of maybe a switch or a dummy switch you might have there, a dummy plug. And you can get the panel that fits right in place, and they come pre-made to fit the brake controller itself. The installation for the ETBC7 on this vehicle can be a little bit challenging. It's not too bad. The battery is in the back. Typically, with these, because you have to mount a couple breakers, you mount your 7-pole, you connect your 4-pole wiring into the back of it, and you run your jacketed wire up under the hood, connect to the battery through a couple breakers, and then run it inside the car. With the battery being back here, you got to take out both panels, side panels, to get your wiring ran inside the vehicle over to the battery. And you got to go back out and then back up to the front. Taking the panels out really isn't too bad. A few screws, bolts here and there. You can pull them out. They pop out fairly easily. Other than that, it's going to be time consuming. You know, it's really not a whole lot of wiring. It's just time consuming. Running wires from here up to the front to get them to your brake controller, and then from here inside and connect to the battery. If this is something that you may not have the time or space to do, check out our dealer locator, find someone near you that is able to put it in. If it is something that you would like to try and install yourself, I promise you can do it. Follow along with me and I'll walk through how to do it now. To start your installation, your 4-pole wiring is already installed, but we need to get the 4-pole in out and down to the 7-pole. Couple fasteners. You're going to have a push-pin fastener here on each side, Phillips head screw up there, and then your tie downs. You're going to have one here and one back there. Once you get those off, then you can actually take this whole panel and pull it to the side. You need to do both sides. The grommets over here, your battery's over here. So we need to be able to get from the battery to the grommet or from the grommet to the battery. This grommet is right there. So cut a little slit in it and you'll be able to feed your 4-pole wire down there and put the grommet back in. This is where it's going to come out underneath the vehicle. You need to take your 4-pole and route it over to the center. After that, you need to mount this 7-pole that comes in your ETBC7 kit. I recommend using a long bracket on this because the exhaust is right here and it pulls this wire away from it. The bracket that the 7-pole is mounted on, or comes with it, comes with the whole ETBC7 kit. So mount your 7-pole to that bracket, and then you're going to mount that to the long bracket. Once you get that mounted, you're going to take one 4-pole in. It's going to have 2 of them. Take one, put it on the bracket like that, and you'll know which one because this one won't stay on there. You're going to take this one. It's going to attach the 4-pole in coming from inside the vehicle.
Once you get those two ends connected, take a zip tie. Like this. And that'll help keep those two 4-pole ends from coming apart. We'll go ahead and cut this off because we're not going to need it. You're going to have 3 wires on there, black, blue, and yellow. We're not going to be using the yellow one. That's for a reverse wire. We're going to be using this black and blue, and then our white one's going to be our ground. It has a ring terminal on it already. These butt connectors that come on here, I recommend cutting them off and put heat shrink on there because this is outside the vehicle, and it's going to help keep the connections from corroding. So we'll cut these off. We'll restrip them and add a heat shrink butt connector. The heat shrink butt connectors don't come with your kit. You can find them here. You can probably find them pretty much in the auto parts store. You're going to get a roll of this jacketed wire. Split the sheathing off one end and then separate your black and white wire and then strip them back. Black is going to go to black, white is going to go to blue. My ground wire. There's not really anywhere right here that I'm able to access to actually get to a good piece of metal to ground that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut that end off. I'm going to add a piece of wire and run it over here to where I'm able to get to some good metal. There's a plastic bracket right here that holds the bottom of your fascia on. You just run it behind it. It'll keep it from, hanging out the bottom here. Now that I've got that routed, I'm going to take all this right here. I'm going to wrap it in black electrical tape, and then I'm going to pull the rest of it up back in there. So I route all my wires over. There's a hole right over here on the side. Took a zip tie and zip tied it up. It keeps it from, again, hanging down, keeps it away from my exhaust. And then we can route into our grommet right there. Ground wire, I extended it right here. Just add another ring terminal, and I'll take a self-tapper and I'll drive it in right there. So I'm going to try to explain this best way possible. The 2 wires that are in here, the black and the white, that we connected to our 7-pole. The white one goes to our brake signal, which has to go to the front, to the back of the brake controller. The black one has to go directly to our battery. And then from our battery, inside to the brake controller. Well, our battery's not up there, it's back here. So rather than split this and then separate these 2 wires, what I'm going to do is I got it marked where the grommet is. I'm going to cut a little bit of this off, a section. Find my black wire, I'm going to cut it in half. And I'm going to add 2 extension wires off of it. Those 2 wires are going to go to my 30 and 40 amp breaker here. The rest of this can all run up together to the brake controller instead of running this up and then coming back and then back up. So I think this is going to make it a little bit easier, and I'm not going to be wasting a whole bunch of stuff. So I've got it marked where my grommet is. Pull out this black wire. We'll get it cut in half. Heat shrink butt connectors, we'll add a wire onto each one, an extension that needs to go inside to the battery over here. Something to keep in mind, if you're doing it this way, you need to make sure that these two wires go to the correct breakers. Remember, we have a 40 amp breaker and a 30 amp breaker. The 40 amp is for power from our 7-pole. The 30 amp is the power from our brake controller. Since we separated these, find the one that's going back to the 7-pole. This is what I recommend doing. And mark the end of it. However you want to mark it, I'm just putting a white mark on there so I know that that one has got to go to my 40 amp breaker. This one, it's in my jacketed wire that I'm running up to the front connected to the brake controller, that's going to go to my 30 amp. As I mentioned before, the jacketed wire that we split has to run up to the front. We got to get it inside the vehicle so we can connect to our brake controller. We also have 2 extra wires that we have to run. One of them is going to be a ground wire that goes from the brake controller to the battery, and the other one is a signal wire from the brake controller, which I'm going to tie into a 4-pole module box back here in the back because we can't use the brake wire on the actual brake switch up there. So I'm going to use my brown wire, this extra brown wire that I had laying around, for my signal wire that's going to go to my box. And then I have a pink and red wire. I didn't have a white one long enough. So I'm going to use this red wire. What I'm going to do is when I get it inside, I'm going to mark this end of it white. So whoever gets back in here, even though it's going to be connected to the negative side of the battery, they'll know that this is a ground wire, not a power wire. However you route your wires, you want to make sure you're staying away from anything hot or moving. What I did is I ran everything up over the top of all of our components here. Came down right here. Over top these 2 lines. Went around this side. 10mm socket, flathead screwdriver. Take this bolt out. Take this one out, which I need to tighten it back down. Flathead screwdriver. Take those and kind of pull down on them as you're loosening those, and they'll pop off. You can take your wires and you can tuck them up above this panel and come out right here. I have a pull wire that I fed down from the driver's side under the engine, or in the engine compartment, and I'm going to use that to pull all these 3 wires up there. So as I mentioned, our brown wire is going to be this signal wire coming from our brake controller. You're going to connect it to the red wire on your 4-pole wiring. We're going to take the red wire that we're running from the brake controller, is going to be our ground, along with the 2 black wires that we added on. We're going to route them across the back here and over to our battery. The red one, ground, is going to be grounded directly to the battery. The black wire that we marked with the white paint marker is going to go to the silver post on the 40 amp breaker, and you're going to make a short lead from the copper post to the battery. The second black wire that's coming from the brake controller is going to go to the silver post on the 30 amp breaker, and you're going to make another short lead from the copper post to the battery. Next thing we need to do is route everything up to the front of the vehicle. Typically we can run it outside the vehicle, except on this vehicle the rubber grommet is a little bit hard to get to, so I found routing it inside is better. We're going to take the rest of our jacketed wire, the red wire that we're using for our ground, and this brown wire, we're going to run it up behind all of our panels on our driver's side. We're going to pop this panel off. You're going to take this rubber trim piece and pull it off, and it opens up behind this panel so you can grab your wiring. You're just going to tuck it in right along the factory wiring, feed it back behind this panel on your B-pillar. It's going to come out right there. You're going to pop this panel off and your kick panel, and you're going to round it up, and we're going to connect it to the plug that's going onto the back of our brake controller module box. So I'm going to explain this I'm going to try not to confuse you because I used a red wire because that's the only wire that I had. On the back of your plug for your brake controller, you're going to have a black wire, blue wire, red wire, and white wire. Black wire is going to connect to the black wire in that jacket that we brought up. The white one is connected to the blue wire on the 7-pole. You're going to connect to the blue wire on the brake controller. The red wire coming off our plug is going to connect to the brown wire that we have for our brake signal on our 4-pole plug. The extra red wire that we ran it up for a ground, is going to connect to the white wire coming off the brake controller plug. So this is where I mounted the brake controller. You want to mount it to something solid. The plug with the 4 wires in it is going to plug into one end, and of course the other end is going to plug into the brake controller knob. You can't get them mixed up. They're only going to plug in one way, and the plugs are different. Now we'll test out our brake controller again now that we've got everything cleaned up. Brake controller manual override button. Brakes. Now we'll test out all of our light functions. Left turn, right turn, running lights, and of course our brakes. That's going to do it for a look at installation of the Red Arc Tow Pro Elite brake controller with the ETBC7 on a 2024 Toyota RAV4.